Hey, welcome everybody to Sunday night. And man, what an interesting day in which we live. And we're starting a new series called King David. And it's going to be cool. We're going to be tying in current things with the Bible and the beginning of Israel and where Israel is today, how all of this affects us. But I really wanted us to have a really good understanding of the beginnings of Israel from the time of David. It's going to be a great series. So we're calling it simply King David, with the subtitle being the land of Israel. Hey, this Tuesday, join me if you can. I'm going to be at Calvary Chapel of the Harbor with Don Stewart and Joe Pettick. It's Pastor Joe Pettick's home church. Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. If you're in the Huntington Beach area of Southern California, we are going to have a terrific time. So it's like a prophecy update with the three of us. Make sure you join us. Also, this week, we are starting a new series called Today in Prophecy, and it's going to be daily news updates beginning on Tuesday. I hope that it blesses you guys. Some of you, we get a lot of requests saying, hey, can you do more news? Because I do the Bible every Sunday morning. I hope you join us for those. We do the Bible every Sunday evening, going through the Bible, although Sunday evening is prophecy related. And then we have the interviews all week and many other things. The Tom Hughes report now, we have that. We have a program coming up on Harpazo TV, which has already started, but more coming on that, more news for you there. But anyways, a lot going on. We have World News Briefing for those of you who join us there at his channel. Lots going on. Let's get going with this. As we begin with King David, let's get an update on what's going on in this world that we live in. So first thing, check out this first article here. Let's see it. It's coming up. I know it is. There it is. Check this out. This is out from the AP, Associated Press. Russia and North Korea signed partnership deal that appears to be the strongest since the Cold War. Very concerning. Of course, Russia isn't part of the axis of Ezekiel chapter 38, but it is with North Korea part of that, or North Korea isn't, but Russia is. North Korea isn't part of Ezekiel 38, but North Korea is part of the axis of evil because this is, man, they're bad. So we look at all these different movements. I do know that Russia's been moving some of their ships out of Cuba, but man, we live in interesting times. We have a lot to talk about as we begin with King David series here in a few minutes. About halfway into it, we're going to make some connections with what's going on with Russia and Norway today. And Norway, of all places, as you're going to see, but not just Norway, Europe and America, related to 1 Samuel. So we're going to get there in a few minutes. But let's go on. What's the next article? If you guys can pull it up here for me. There you go. White House is out of Axios. Cancels meeting, scolds Netanyahu in protest over video. So basically what it is Netanyahu is obviously unhappy. The U.S. says, hey, we're not going to give Israel ammunitions anymore. In fact, I need to pull this up. You guys can give me just a minute. I need to pull this up. You guys have got to hear this because this is somewhat disturbing. When Netanyahu does this video, the U.S. administration says, guess what, Netanyahu, now you've really ticked us off, and we're going to really stick it to you, a response out of the White House. Check this out. Why this matters. We just shared with you, right? President Biden's top advisors were enraged by Netanyahu's video. The White House decided to cancel Thursday's meeting with Netanyahu. Look at this. This is a quote from a U.S. official. This decision makes it clear that there are consequences for pulling such stunts. I want you to let that sink in. What the U.S. administration has just said to Benjamin Netanyahu and all of Israel, since you made this video, guess what? There are consequences since you made this video. Israel, friends, this is very, very bad for the United States. Israel is the apple of God's eye. This is insane. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, I will bless those who bless thee, I'll curse those who curse thee. The United States administration is poking their finger in the eye of God, the apple of God's eye, and saying this, there are consequences to you. It reminds me of what Obama said to Netanyahu when Obama was president, when Obama came and spoke at Congress, spoke a little bit about this on World News Briefing with Joe Pettick the other day, but Obama said to Netanyahu, there's going to be consequences to pay for you showing up at Congress. And I believe now part of the consequences are exactly what we've been watching happen. We give money, billions of dollars to Iran. We give money to the PLO, which is a terror organization. I talked about that last Sunday. Go back and watch my Sunday night prophecy update from last week if you haven't seen it, to really connect the dots with the PLO, their beginnings, and what's really going on today, and these fake peace agreements for Israel to give back the land, the whole thing. So it makes sense when we see Israel saying, or the U.S. administration say, guess what, Netanyahu, there's going to be consequences. Well, they're already suffering what the U.S. is saying. We're not giving you any more ammunition. You aren't getting any more bullets. You're not going to get anything from us. You're on your own. So we're going to fight a war on our own. Netanyahu challenges that and says, hey, you got to be kidding me. And the U.S. administration says, oh yeah, we're going to take it a step further. You think that's bad? It's going to be even worse for you. Friends, this is going to be really, really, really bad for the United States of America. I promise you, because God never slumbers nor sleeps. And although the world is against Israel, and America definitely against Israel right now, other countries are not, this isn't going good, friends. This is not going good. Okay, another article. Check out this one. IDF generals approve battle plan for all-out war with Lebanon. I'm sure all the naysayers and the Israel haters are going to get all mad about this, but Israel has a huge problem with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the most well-funded terror organization in the world. They can fire, I believe it's something like 5,000 rockets and missiles a day at Israel, many of them precision guided so they can actually hit targets within Israel, unlike Hamas, which is just like a big bottle rocket that goes off and wherever their rockets would land, they would land. Hezbollah is a much greater threat, able to launch way more weapons, use way more weapons than Hamas was ever able to do. And this is huge. Israel has to deal with this, but get out the anti-Semitic statements again, get them ready to go, because Israel has to finish this. And I'm not saying that everything Israel does is good, but I am on God's side. And I know that God is going to defend Israel. Zechariah chapter 12, he defends them. Ezekiel 38 and 39, he defends them. God never slumbers or sleeps, Psalm 121. He is the one who keeps Israel. And this is not going to go good for those who go against Israel. All right, so let's get going. We have a few more things I'm going to keep you updated as we go on. As we begin the life of, as we begin with King David in the land, and we make connections for today, let's get this understanding as we begin. Here's the problem that Israel had way back then. So you're going back 3,000 years, right? Time of Judges is ending. Excuse me. The time of Judges is ending, and you're going to enter into the time of Kings. But the problem is that Israel didn't do things, they didn't want to live for God. Here's a couple of quotes for you. As far as they could see, as we begin, Israel is threatened by their enemies, but instead of trusting in God and allowing God to help them through their difficult times, they took matters into their own hands and they made a choice. And the problem was simple. It's not that they couldn't wait on God, but they wouldn't wait on God. God didn't do things the way they wanted, and God didn't do things when they wanted. That's how we often are, right? God's not doing this the way we want. He's not doing these things when we want. Therefore, they took matters into their own hands. They made a decision. They decided it was better to have a man rule over them than to have God rule over them. It was a bad move on their part, but God is going to answer. He's going to honor their decision. Okay, you want a man to rule over you? These are going to be the consequences. And wait till you see the consequences. We're going to see them in this message. Wait till you see them, because we are experiencing the same things today. God warns. This is what's going to happen when a man rules over you. So let's see how things go. The first one we notice, number one, three main points I have for you. Number one is the problem. So we first learn about the problem in the book of Judges. So let's begin there. It's the very last verse in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 21, beginning in verse 25. It says this: in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Wow. There is no king. So mark that. This is the beginning. There is no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So Israel's first king, when you understand it, is really coming out of the time of the Judges. You could say the time of Judges gave birth to Israel's first king. So what was that time like? As Judges opens up, Joshua had just died. Joshua, the great military leader and leader in the Lord for the people of Israel, he had just died. And as a result, Israel turned from God. They no longer worshiped God, and they began to worship other gods or follow other religions, we might say. As such, they also began to engage in the sins of the world. So God tested them by their enemies. They were threatened on every side. On one side, it was the Philistines. On another side, it was the Amalekites. On another side, it was the Amorites. On another side, it was the Jebusites. In the case of Israel, if they turned to God in their time of testing, God would send them a judge, a warrior. We think Samson. We think Gideon. We think Jephthah. If you know the progression of what happened during the time of Judges, it was a cycle. When you open up in the book of Judges, Joshua dies, and then they're raised up a generation that did not know war. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know what it was to have hardships, and they were very laxed. And we see the same things as we look at the Western world today, and we are starting to increasingly learn about war. But what happened in the time of Judges, same thing as today. Israel would go through cycles. They would be oppressed by one of their neighbors, one of their enemies. They would cry out to the Lord. They would be oppressed. They would be persecuted. They'd be humiliated. They'd lose lives in war and battle. They'd cry out to the Lord, Lord, save us. The Lord would hear their cry. He would rescue them. He would save them. They'd say, oh, Lord, you are so good. You are God. God would bless them. They'd have their luxuries. They'd have their life. Life is good. They'd have a life of ease. And then when they got to that place, they would start to look to their pagan neighbors and say, hey, we want what they have, and the pagan religions. And they would start to bring in the pagan religions. They start to think, we want to live like the pagans live. They would mix their relationships. They had all these different dynamics going on, to the point where after they brought in the religions and said all roads lead to God and all of these different things, when they weren't living separated for the God of heaven, when it all became convoluted, after they were blessed, after they had their luxuries, after they had their affluence, after they had their life of ease, they let their guard down, and then the enemy that they invited into their camp oppressed them and would start to destroy them, start to take them even as slaves, and then they would cry out, oh, God, save us. And then God would hear their cry, and he'd save them, and he'd bless them, and all of a sudden they start to have affluence and luxuries, go into ease, and say, hey, we want what the pagans have. And then they'd invite the pagan stuff in. They'd open their borders, so to speak. They'd start to do what the pagans did, and then the pagans would oppress them and take them slaves, and then they cry out, God, save us, and then God would save them, and then he would bless them, and then he'd give them luxuries and affluence, and then they'd let their guard down again. It was just this cycle. It would go like this. This is where we are in America. We're in the cycle right now, and right now we're way down here. We've blown open our borders. All these people are coming in. All roads lead to heaven. The churches are compromised. It should be a light to the world. Churches, so few churches are even a light to the world anymore. A light to America, a light to anything. Some still are, not many, but some still are. But we see this same dynamic, and we can tell because we know the Bible how things are going. Nevertheless, Israel never seemed to learn the lessons. Hey, every time we get we get blessed by God, we start to take it easy, and then we give in, and then we get oppressed, we become slaves. They never seem to learn the lesson. It's just this constant cycle. And the cycle would last for a long time, but it would happen again and again and again. So at the end of Judges, we're there. It's the cycle. There's no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Hey, love is love. Tell me we don't hear that, right? Everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. Okay, so as we look at this, and we start realizing where we are today, there's no king in the land. There's no king in this world that is respected. There's no leader. We look at the pathetic administration of Mr. Ice Cream Man Joe Biden, right? It's horrible. So we have wars and rumors of wars breaking out all over. I'm convinced if we had a different leader, if Trump was in there, like him or hate him, we wouldn't be having this threat with Russia, with China, with North Korea, with Iran, with Israel, Gaza situation. We wouldn't have these things going on. But there's really no real leader in this world right now. Lawlessness is even abounding. Check this out. This is from France. Check out this article. Quick one here. Look at this. This coming out of France. France is on the brink of an all-out civil conflict. As you read it, 500,000 leftists threatening. You start finding out it's not just France. We find out, we're going to get more into this in just a few more minutes, but you look at the United States of America, what's going to happen? An election is coming up. If Trump gets elected, all hell's going to break loose from the other side. If Biden gets elected, or Newsom, probably going to be the one actually running, listen, he's just going to clamp everything down and make everything worse. Listen, he'll blow the borders up more than Ice Cream Man Joe has. I mean, I live in California. You don't want this guy in California coming to your place. I want you to think of this. You don't want him leading the United States of America. Very bad. You think we got it bad now. It's only going to get worse. Listen, the governor of California, here in California, you know what they just did? Cut over $100 million of funding from law enforcement. That's crazy. Have you seen what's going on in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Oakland and Sacramento? Have you seen those places in Northern California? Have you seen what's going on here in Southern California, in Los Angeles? Stay away from those areas. They have a law enforcement shortage problem. And there is lawlessness that's abounding, and they're blowing open the borders. So what on earth do you think is going to happen? This is planned. It's intentional. Bring in the lawlessness. So cut over $100 million from law enforcement. What are they doing? You're going to create more and more lawlessness. That's what these son of a guns want, right? Because when you create the chaos, then they come along and they sell you the solution. They sell you the answer, which I have a lot more to say about that. I'll be in Colorado this week, and I'll be talking about that this coming week. But we live in a time when there's no viable king in this world. Everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. And we've put our trust in all these different things of this world. We have, what is it, Pride Month going on right now? This is insane. People are given over to their own the pagan things, the sex cultures, and they're given over to, well, just give me enough money. I'm convinced so many politicians are bought off by China and the George Soroses. Look at the media personalities on news. They're not reporters. They're actors. They're paid actors. Give them enough money, they're going to do whatever they're told to do. Think of this, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 19. Whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. You give a person money from George Soros, they're going to be enslaved to that. You give a person money, you start promoting Pride Month. You start, whatever it is you're doing, whatever you're given over to, whatever overcomes you, you're going to be enslaved to that thing. Herein lies the problem. It's a problem for today as it was for Israel. There was no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. All right, so we see the problem. Next thing we know, let's move on to the plan. Check it out, because now we're going to get into 1 Samuel. So we've got a problem. There's no king in the land. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes because they didn't want God. So they have a plan. This plan is exceptionally bad, but it's their plan. Same plan that we have in this world, all over the world, because of human nature. God wanted to be their king. They said no. Chapter 8, verse 1, 1 Samuel. Now it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of the second Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. So Samuel, the great judge and prophet, his own sons aren't walking with the Lord. They're taking bribes. Pay us off for this, we'll turn the other way. Pay us for this, we'll say that, even though we know it's a lie. They perverted justice, just like today. Verse 4, then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, look, you're old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the other nations. Wow. Man. So Samuel, he's the last judge. The book of Judges really continues into 1 Samuel. He's the last judge, but he's also a prophet. They didn't like him as judge because he's righteous, and they certainly didn't like him as a prophet because he would talk to them about God and the things that they better get right because God is in heaven and they're not. And they're saying, so what they say is, your sons are bad, therefore you're no good. And you got a messed up family, therefore you're no good. And we don't want you. We want a king just like all the other nations have. The people had drifted from God. In fact, you could even say what the people were, they were on a long drift from God. This can happen to us too. You can get so far from God that you don't want God. So that's what happened. Again, this is the end of Judges, the beginning of Kings. It's just a cycle. And the cycle continues today with every single person on the planet. When life is good, people start to not look to God so much, start to be influenced, let their guard down, invite a little bit of the sin stuff going on. You go back, all of a sudden you're oppressed by whatever it is. You cry out to God, oh God, save me and help me. And God does it, right? But the people were on this long drift from God. They had drifted from him. They wanted to do what the pagans did. Here they even say, give us a different kind. No, we don't want you as a judge, and we want a king like the other pagan nations have. A long drift from God to the point where they didn't want God. I have this pastor I know, Pastor Raul Reese. I remember him telling the story probably 30 years ago. If you live in a beach community, you understand how this works. So the Pacific Ocean, I'm not sure if Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, I don't know what beach it was. It was in Southern California. And there's this current, right? If you're out in the water, like body surfing or whatever, surfing, body surfing, whatever, there's the shore right in front of you. You see it. That's your anchor. There's your stuff. There's your lifeguard tower. You have all these visuals, right? Well, there's a current that takes you. And if you're not paying attention, the current will take you. It's going to. So you constantly have to check where you are, and you got to go back. I mean, constantly. You're doing it the whole time. Well, he said one time he put his stuff down, and he had his keys there, he had his wallet, he had his chair and everything. And he goes, and I wasn't paying attention. And he goes, I'm out in the water, and next thing I know, an hour went by or whatever, I got out of the water, I went over to my chair, and I got mad. My chair was gone, my keys were gone, my wallet was gone. I was livid. I'm yelling at the lifeguard, how could you have, somebody just stole all my stuff. Well, come to find out, nobody has stolen anything. He wasn't paying attention to the shore. He wasn't paying attention to where stuff was or the lifeguard tower. He had drifted so far, I don't know, a mile down or whatever it was. He had drifted so far that he was so far from his stuff, he couldn't see it, nothing. That's what happens. We can get so far from keeping our eyes fixed on the Lord. In the case of Israel, then Raul Reese had to walk back. But in the case of Israel, they got so far, drifted so far from him, they didn't want God anymore. They were not interested in God. They simply wanted change, and they wanted to be done with their problems. We got problems. They looked around, make us a king. Code 4, give us a man. Why? So we can be like everyone else. That's verse 5. Therein lies their plan. Therein lies their solution. They did not want God to rule over them. So that was their plan. That was their solution. All right. We don't want you to rule over us. Make us a king like the other nations. Verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Samuel has nothing to do with you, all right? You might feel like it's about you. It's about me. They're not rejecting you, Samuel. Oh, they've rejected you, but they're really rejecting me. They do not want God. Listen, it seems, folks, that's happened in America. America seems to be in this place where there's this disdain of God. I mean, when you see a pro sports person mention Jesus, look out. You would think all hell broke loose. Well, it probably did, because Satan doesn't want to mention, and he has all of his minions working on MSM. So you start to see these dynamics going on. We've kicked God out of the schools. We've kicked him out of the courts. We've kicked him out of Washington. We've kicked him out of the places of governors and mayors, school boards, schools, universities. We don't want God in anything. By the way, did you see this? Louisiana has just made it where, guess what? 10 Commandments are going to be posted in every school. Boy, I bet that's getting the devil all kinds of mad and his people. But they didn't want God to rule over them back then. And guess what? America doesn't seem to want God to rule over us right now. I mean, some of us do. That's why you watch these. Because we're saying, wait a minute, we need God. Listen, really, we're in this place where we are demanding unrighteousness. Not righteousness. We're demanding unrighteousness. Give us Pride Week. Give us these different dynamics. Listen, continue with abortion. No, let's fund it with our tax dollars. Oh, let's call it women's rights. It's terrible. And now we're experiencing the consequences of our decisions. And we have perilous times that are here. In the last days, perilous times will come. You know how that passage goes, where Paul's writing to Timothy. We read about in 2 Timothy chapter 3. And Paul says, in the last days, perilous times will come. Tell me this doesn't sound like today, and especially in America. Men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. From such people turn away. People say, oh, I believe in God. God says, no, no, you don't. Look at your character, right? We have a country and a people that has said, we're demanding unrighteousness. We don't want God to rule over us. We don't want to hear about your God. And they even do their best to shut down churches. Remember a while back when churches did shut down? I praise God we didn't shut down ours. A few others didn't shut theirs down. I praise God for the pastors that were faithful to keep their doors open during the last year, you know what stuff. But nevertheless, Israel wasn't learning their lessons. People typically don't seem to learn their lessons. Israel seemed to have a disdain for God, rather they preferred a man to lead them, a person they liked. So we have the problem, we have the plan. We want a king like other nations. And then number 3, what do they have? This is the last main point. They have their person. God told Samuel, we just read it, to warn the people what would happen because of their decision to remove God and have the man of their choice lead them. We've got the man of this choice leading this nation right now, no matter what you think. Listen, God is sovereign, and I have my own thoughts on this last election, on what really happened. I'm not allowed to talk about that, apparently. But regardless, God is sovereign. And I believe God has given us the current Mr. Ice Cream Man as a judgment over America. I mean, what a laughingstock, him and cackling Kamala. What a joke to the world. It's like God is holding them up, going, look, you guys, you wanted a man? He gave you a man, or whatever he is. We have the problem, we have the plan, we have the person, and God says, I'm going to warn you, this is what's going to happen. Verse 9 of 1 Samuel chapter 8. Now therefore heed the voice of the people, Samuel. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. Listen to this. Here's what your king is going to be like. And tell me, we don't have these things right now. And he said, he told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, verse 11, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. You know, the one you choose, the one that God gives you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over thousands and captains over his 50s. He will set some to plow his ground, some to reap harvest, some to make his weapons of war and equipment for chariots. Well, he's talking about going into war. He's going to enlist your sons into war. He will take your daughters and to perfumers, to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. They're going to work for the king. And he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. Wait a minute. Take the property from him, make up a law, take the property from them and give it to somebody else? Yes. Yes, that's what he's going to do. Wow. He will take your male servants and your female servants, your finest young men and your donkeys, and put them to work, his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and you will be his servants. In other words, he'll come and confiscate your farms. Oh, is that going on right now? He's going to take, let's say you're a homesteader. You get your gardens going, you get your chickens going. We're going to take those things. And you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. I'm going to stop right there, but tell me this isn't disturbing, because I'm telling you right now, what we just read is very troubling. All right, check this out. What are we learning here? There's going to be a national draft. That's what he's being told. You're going to be subject to taxes, and in the taxes, everything's going to be taxed. All of your stuff is going to be taken that the king wants, given to his friends. And you're going to be subject to a king who might or might not have your best interest in mind. You know, they'd eventually get King David and then King Solomon, but for the most part, bad kings, right? National draft, taxes, take your property and everything else that goes along with it, take your farms, your homesteads. And you might have a good king, but you might not. In this case, they wouldn't. All right, let me talk a little bit about the national draft. Okay, I brought this up, and you can't make this up on Thursday. I'm going to bring it up again. Check this out. Robbie Starbuck posted this. There you go. So if you joined our military, you'd get, and what he's doing, he's answering what the military is saying, hey, recruitment numbers are down. Nobody wants to join the military anymore. Well, he just simply responds, why? So if you join our military, this is what you get. A decrepit, loony commander-in-chief. Yes, that's him, Mr. Ice Cream Man. Doctors on base that can trans your kids. Drag queen influencers if you join the military. Fake meat slop to eat, not even real meat. Forced DEI trainings. That's right. Trans admirals. Isn't that wonderful? We get it. So who's your admiral? We aren't real sure. It's a they, them, her, it. Wow, we don't know. COVID shots, low pay. I wonder why we have a recruiting crisis. And then at the bottom, and this has been big news over the last week, Pentagon seeks approval to feed American troops experimental lab-grown meat in order to reduce CO2 footprint. What a joke. And you wonder why we have a recruiting crisis. That's one problem. So they're talking about, hey, let's do a draft. What does Saul do? Or what's the king going to do? He's going to draft your sons to war. That's what he's going to do. So this is what happens when God is not king. This is the backdrop of King David coming into the picture. But right now, we're just going to deal with Saul this week and until David comes in the picture. But I want you to think of this. Let me pull this up here. This is so we have a draft problem. Got to pull this up. Here it is. As we think of what all of these different dynamics, why nobody wants to go into the military. So now they're saying they're going to have a draft, but it's not just the wokeism. It's not just the wokeism. Check this out. Pastor Joe Bell, Calvary Chapel of Lafayette, Indiana pastor. He's in Norway right now. He texted me the other day, and he said, we are in Norway visiting family. FYI, American troops are on the move here in Norway, moving more and more on the border between Russia and Norway. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. Then he said, there's a so-called official number according to AI, but according to my son-in-law who lives here, he says they are moving in by the droves. The troops are U.S. troops moving in by the droves. The official report is, according to most recent information, approximately 1,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Norway. They're part of the Marine Corps Rotational Force of Europe, and they're based in the northern region of Norway near the city of Tromsø. The U.S. military presence in Norway is aimed at enhancing security and stability in the region, and also serves as a deterrent to Russian aggression in the Arctic. So we hear, what is really going on. The wokeism is a problem. Well, obviously, and other things I'm still not even allowed to talk about. So the military numbers are way down for the U.S. military. We have a threat of a war with China for Taiwan, all the stuff going on with Russia everywhere, Russia, Cuba, Russia, Ukraine, obviously Iran. We have the U.S. administration saying we're going to give billions to Ukraine, but we're going to stick it to you, Israel, no matter what the other people are saying about there, the anti-Semites. And you look at what's going on, now they're saying we're going to draft your sons into war. And you also wonder about daughters too, because they obviously go along with the whole trans thing. What is a woman, right? So you look at this and go, wait a minute, when you turn from God, this is what you can expect. And we are witnessing this. And are we, now this is, I look at this and go, this would be awful. My son is drafting age. And the two other guys working here right now in the studio with me, drafting age, and thinking, this is bad stuff. And we have a bad leader. We have some wicked people that are leading this thing. But we have turned from God. We've gone the way of the pagan world. We celebrate the month of June as Pride Month. We celebrate that. We talk bad about marriage. We abort babies. All these wicked things that are taking place. And now we're going to war? Why are they talking about a draft? God warned, this is what's going to happen when God does not rule over you. This is exactly what the Bible teaches. Proverbs 29, verse 2, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. We enter onto the scene. Israel's king, first king, King Saul. All right, so you look at that. Can you pull that verse back up, those two verses? That verse back up. There you go. Proverbs 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Amen. When the wicked man rules, the people groan. Guess what? We're starting to groan, and we should. We have wicked leaders leading this country. All right, let me close you with a couple of thoughts as we wrap up for our time in King David. So we're going to begin from here. We've laid the foundation, the problem, we've seen that, the plan, and then the person. This kind of king you want. Out of this will be birthed King David, and we're going to get more and more into Israel as we go forward, but we can see the beginning of the problem. All right, a couple of things to close you with. Number one, don't look for a physical solution to a spiritual problem, all right? That's what Israel did. They looked for a physical solution to a spiritual problem. They needed the Lord, but they wanted a man to take the place. They didn't want the Lord to rule over them. They wanted a man to rule over them. We do the same thing. There's spiritual problems, and sometimes we think, well, God's not doing it the way we want, and God doesn't do things when we want. Remember, I opened up with that. We do the same thing. So we take matters into our own hands. There are spiritual problems, and we need to learn to wait on God. Here's the deal. God had promised Israel that he would do their fighting for them if they would simply trust him. They didn't need to worry about threats from their enemies. Exodus chapter 14, verse 4. Says, the Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 30. The Lord your God who goes before you, he will fight for you. Joshua 10, verse 25. Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. We have the reminder. Israel had the reminder. The Lord will fight for you. The Lord will fight for you. The Lord will fight for you. We have the same reminder. But so apply that to your life personally, right? But I want to go to Israel for a minute because I believe what's happening right now is very similar with Israel right now. What's going on in the beginning of Israel's nation in the sense of a king, right? They were looking for a man to save them. God says, okay, I'll honor your decision. God will do that. God will honor your decision. But the problem Israel has had almost since their very beginning, there's been very few exceptions in their history, is they turned to their neighbors for answers. The book of Judges, they turned to their neighbors. They said, hey, the pagan neighbors, let's invite them all in. Let's blow open our borders. Let's do all this stuff, right? So oppression comes in. And then here they say, they turn to their neighbors. We want to be like them. We want a king, a man to rule us. We don't want God. And then after they become a nation and they have their kings and they start to have troubles and they turn from the Lord, they don't, throughout Israel's history, even today, instead of turning to the Lord, they are turning to other nations. Hence a problem between Israel and the U.S. right now. It's going to be a bigger problem for the U.S. It looks like a bigger problem for Israel, but it's going to be a bigger problem for the U.S. when the story opened up with Netanyahu saying, hey, what about our ammunition? We need it. What are you guys doing, right? How could you do that to us? The U.S. responds with, oh, yeah, you're going to get consequences just for making a video about that. That's what's going to happen. This is going to be bad for America to do that, but the problem is Israel turned to America. Israel has turned to other nations throughout their history, their ancient history and modern history, for their help and for their hope and for their salvation. God is doing something. All the other nations are leaving Israel. I think El Salvador is still with them, but all the other nations are leaving Israel. And America still says, no, we still have your back. And then the very next statement is, you're going to get it from us. We're going to stick it to you, and you are going to pay. Israel is being forced into a false peace, right? We know that's coming. Daniel chapter 9, we get that. I think it's long before Antichrist shows up on the scene too. But nevertheless, what's happening right now, God is the one who's going to fight for Israel. God is turning his attention from the Gentile world. He's turning his attention to Israel, because Israel is going to come to a place of crying out for the Lord Jesus Christ, when they will say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Israel is going to say that, and Jesus is going to come to the rescue. God is turning them. Daniel chapter 12 we saw, where God says that he will break the power of the holy people. In other words, their stubbornness, and they're going to turn to him and surrender to him. But it's always been this way with Israel. You look here, they're looking for a king. They're looking for a man. They want to be like the other nations. God says, I want to be your king. Keep that in mind. Last thing, number 2, God honors our decisions, good and bad. He does not make us love him, nor does he make us obey him. In Israel's case, the people's vision was framed by the fears of the present, and therefore wanted to conform to whoever seemed to be working well, to whatever seemed to be working well with the other nations. So this works well for them, so let's do this. So Israel, look, we have no king, or we want to be like the other kings. God, you're not really taking care of us. We see, hey, they're being blessed. We want to go that way. Hey, well, okay, we'll just do our own kingdom. We won't have them rule over us. We'll just raise up our own king. Didn't go well. As we look at what's going on in the world today, I implore you to keep your eyes fixed on the Lord Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of your faith. But also remember this, as we begin this series with King David. Listen, Psalm 121. I read it with Joe Pettick the other day on his channel TV for World News Briefing. Psalm 121, I love it. The psalmist wrote, I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. It may seem, as you look at everything right now, especially if you're Jewish and maybe you're living in Israel or whatever it is, you're looking, going, where's God in all of this? God never slumbers nor sleeps. He is the one who keeps Israel. Israel is the apple of his eye. But I'm much more concerned about what's going to happen to America. I believe, as I mentioned, Joe Biden is a judgment on America. I believe we're in such deep trouble. And then to turn our back on Israel and to say, big consequences are coming to you, Netanyahu. Bad news. It continues, verse 5, Psalm 121. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. So keep that in mind. God bless you guys. Thank you for joining me. Listen, tomorrow, well, we have great stuff coming. We have really cool stuff coming. And all week long, and I'll be starting today in prophecy on Tuesday, daily news updates. I hope you like it. We used to do it a long time ago, doing that again. Tuesday night, if you're in Huntington Beach, join me with Pastor Joe Pettick and Don Stewart at Calvary Chapel of the Harbor, Pastor Joe Pettick's home church. God bless you guys. And let's keep our eyes fixed on Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith, knowing as we see these things begin to take place, our redemption draws near.